Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Arty class hosted by Shopkeep Arty. Our shop platform is used by artists and other creatives to take the hassle out of selling whatever they want online. Visit our website or our YouTube channel, and there's loads of videos all about our platform for artists that makes it really simple to watch. For those watching for the first time, be it on this interactive webinar or live on YouTube, our free weekly RT classes feature award-winning artists and are designed for all ages, providing a creative escape 2 times a week on a Tuesday and a Thursday at 2 o'clock UK time. You do need to register for each interactive webinar, and you can do this by visiting shopkeeparty.com/Arty classes. And I'll just show you how easy it is to browse all the different things that we have. Here's our website, shopkeeparty.com. Literally in the menu, go to Arty classes. And on Arty classes, you can see all the different art classes that are coming up. We've got some amazing ones coming up shortly. In fact, we've got a masterclass this afternoon as well with Liz Chatterton. That's been very, very popular. Tim Fisher's an amazing artist. Ian Fennelly is going to be doing a bridge in Prague, actually. And David Bellamy's written many, many books. So we've got loads of great, amazing people coming up. And you can also look at our previous Arty classes here, literally by pressing this button. And all the Arty classes that we've had in the past, you can literally scroll down, click on it and watch the video live, 45-minute video, and can, in this particular instance, paint animal eyes. So there you go. So we are continually hunting out the best artists from around the world and share them with you for an hour live, and totally free every week. If you enjoy it, you then get the chance to join them at a later date for an exclusive masterclass where they can share many more tips and techniques with you to really make you a better artist. It's loads of fun too. Arty classes are great, but the masterclasses are on a whole new level. There's much less people, so it's more intimate and there's loads more time. So it's very relaxing, loads of fun, and you even end up with an amazing piece of artwork to show it at the end of it. It's also works out at roughly less than £18 an hour, so it's amazing value as well. I'm really excited this week as, no, you don't have to pack your bags, but we'll be taking a trip anyway to, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, Cohasset Harbour. Cohasset? Cohasset. Yeah. Okay, Cohasset Harbour. It's just south of Boston, and I thought you'd be interested to see exactly where it is. So we don't have to take a flight. We're going to go straight there. There we go. And there you go. You can see Boston there, and there's Cohasset Harbour just here, just to give it in a perspective with the US. There we go. Quite sort of just up from New York there. And we've also got a little photo of the harbour as well. Are you ready for this? So just a few minutes walk away from Sarah, it looks like this. Look at that. Doesn't that look pretty amazing? So that's where we are today. Fantastic. Now, Sarah is a really experienced artist who's been teaching botanical watercolour for 30 years, both in the UK and the USA. She hasn't quite got a US accent actually, and is now Education Director of Botanical Art and Illustration at Wellesley College. Is that right? Wellesley? Yeah, Wellesley College. And is also Founding Director of the New England Society of Botanical Artists. She exhibited at the Royal Horticultural Society, the Horticultural Society of New York, the New York Botanical Gardens, and the Smithsonian Botanic Garden in Washington, D.C. She's also won many awards for her artwork, which is included in numerous publications and collections internationally. So a really, really experienced botanical artist day. As always, Sarah and I can't see or hear you. Ideally, type your question in the Q&A section. There's a Q&A section at the bottom, and I can then look at that and I can ask Sarah your question at the appropriate time, or I can respond directly depending on what your question is. The other way that you can interact is if you want to ask a question directly to Sarah, press the little hand icon, and I can see that. It's almost like raising your hand in a classroom, and I can invite you in and you can ask a question to Sarah directly. But we've got very limited time, so please just respect everyone's time. Keep your question fairly concise, short and concise. That would be great. If you are watching on YouTube, hello. There is a little bit of a delay on YouTube, but I am keeping a monitor of your comments. So if you want any shout outs or whatever, by all means, type whatever you want in there, and I'll try and respond to that too. But I think that's pretty much it. Finally, we'll stop around halfway to take a short break, and I'll be asking Sarah to outline her in-depth and exclusive masterclass on the 15th of October. That's a Thursday, the 15th. But for now, it's time for me to hand over to Sarah. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. And welcome to my first Arty class. I just thought I'd quickly show you a view out of my window. John said I should, because
yeah,
view out of my window.
Look at that. There you go. It's not quite the harbour, but it's
not quite the harbour, because I'm right in the corner of the house. But you can see a good old New England porch, and these are big old linden trees they were designed. That this street was designed and planted by the Olmsted Company, who also planted the Boston Public Garden, the New Central Park, Montreal in Montreal, and a lot of other public parks and gardens.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. So the same people that planted those trees planted Central Park?
Yeah, well, they're designers. They were kind of landscape designers and architects.
Wow.
But the only reason I really know that is that one of my students manages the Olmsted papers, so she told me that. So
that's incredible. Great.
Yeah.
So we're doing a rose, I think, today. Is that right?
We're doing a rose. That's right. And so I'm just going to take. Can I take this back now?
Yeah.
Shall I leave with? This?
Yeah, you can leave. Yeah.
Okay. All right. No, I can't do that. A second. Okay. So today we're painting a rose, and I think I sent you all. You've all had the photograph. I don't usually work from photographs, and actually my rose, the actual rose that I worked from originally has died, but this is very like it. So you can see it's a double rose, and in America, I don't know what they're called in the UK anymore because I've been here so long, but it's sort of a landscape rose. It's called a knockout rose. And when I start off any illustration, once I've done my transfer, I always photocopy or use my tracing as a reference. And before I really get too into it, I mark where all my darks and lights are going to be, so that even if my rose has died, which has happened, if I have good photographs, I have those to help. And one thing that I find really helps, if you can see my actual phone, there's my actual photograph, the one that you got, but I've also put it into grayscale on the filters there, so I can use that as well to help me judge whether I've got different parts dark or light enough. So that's just how I start, and I keep this with me. It's called my Tonal Study, and I think it's really key because it means if I know what my colors are, and you can see I've got my colors, I keep a good record of my colors, and in my very technical speech, I call that my splodging strip. And I've got my Tonal Study and I have good photographs, then I should be able to do my painting. Now, the splodging strip is pretty key, because when you look at paint photos on your phone or wherever you keep them, there's always a kind of a filter. So I like to check that the colors are absolutely true by looking at my original specimen. So I do all that usually when I have my fresh specimens. So I have a splodging strip of the actual colors I see, I have my photograph, I've got a good drawing, and then I can carry on drawing. Now my paintings, when I'm painting myself, often take me quite a long time. So what we're doing today is just the beginning layers. And I'm sure you've taken lots of classes with lots of other people, but I'm rather weird that I like painting with two brushes. I use one for my paint and one for my water, and I'll show you how I do it. It means that a lot of the time, when you see watercolor painters painting, they will mix up the most incredible color, which is an absolutely perfect match. But then what happens is they'll paint that first color down. So I'm using my Tonal Study now. So I'm working on this petal here, which is the bottom petal, and you can start working around. You can see I've worked around the back, but the way I do it is that
Sarah, would you be able to just maybe move your drawing a little bit so you can see the sketch over to the right a little bit? Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah, that would be great. Just so we can see the corner of what you're drawing.
Okay.
That'd be, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm working on this petal here. So what I do is I first of all, I make sure I've got the bit behind here, the petal behind a little bit darker. And you can see now I've got a hard edge along the petal in front. And with my water brush, which is drier than my paintbrush, I'll touch the outside edge of that to pull it out so that I don't have two hard edges. And the same thing here, I started that a bit prematurely, but I'll go back to it now. So I want to make sure I show the edge of one petal against the other, but I'm just softening each edge so that it looks like a nice soft fold. And once I've got that one sorted out, then I can go down to the one below it, which is this one here. And I'll do the same thing. So I'll paint down the edge, paint down the edge. It's a bit darker on this side because the light usually in botanical art, in traditional botanical art, the light source is usually coming from the left. So therefore, that means the right-hand side is going to be in deeper shadow. And if you're taking photographs to paint from, you need to make sure you have the light coming from the right side, because that's really the way that people see art the best. Because of the way we read from left to right, we also read a painting from left to right without even realizing it.
Someone's just asked, could you please say the colors you're using?
Yeah, so sorry, yes. So I'm just starting, I use a basic palette. So I'm just starting with Permanent Rose. So here's my Permanent Rose, and you can see it's a very watery mixture. And I think the colors I'm really going to be using for this are Permanent Rose and then a little bit of Quinacridone Magenta. And I'll show you my palette again. I load my brush up with really quite watery watercolor, and then I'll take a piece of paper towel or a piece of cotton, and I'll just twist my brush around so that I've got a nice point, but the belly of the brush is full of paint. So I'm actually controlling how much comes off the tip. I also will, my water brush, I do the same thing. So I just take a little bit out because you don't want too much water. In fact, your water brush should be slightly drier than your paintbrush. So I'll go in now and work on this one here. So I'm just using a very dilute wash of Permanent Rose. You can see because I let that dry, I got a bit of a bump. Now it's really a good idea not to put too much paint down the first time, because hot press paper is really, really absorbent. And if you put too much paint down, you're not going to be able to move it. If you put very little paint down, it's much easier to move. And in botanical art circles, this first wash is called a tea wash, which really means it's like if you've got a tea bag, which John was talking about, and you just swish it around in your tea, and just for a couple of seconds until it's just a little bit colored. That's about how much paint you should have in your water. So it means you can adjust it if you want to a bit later on, but it just gives you, you're just really, what I'm doing is transferring my tonal study onto my painting. And I've almost done that. Okay, so I go into the center now, which is a bit more complicated. So occasionally, if I've got a line that's too dark, I will just lift it up with my putty eraser. So this is a kneadable eraser, and make sure you've got a little clean bit, and then you can just go in and lift off any hard watercolor, which can happen when you've transferred. It can get a bit hard. So, and then I also have this other little eraser, which is a Tombow Mono Zero, and it has a little tiny point on it, so that it's very easy for me to just go into little tiny areas, and anywhere I see a line that I don't need, I can lift it up. And I can see I've got a couple of those, so I can lift those up. And then I use my feather, because I don't want to get many of the grease from my fingers on my page. So I use a feather or a brush or something just to take off that extra paint.
Some people might have missed, what was that to feather from? Did you find it, did you say?
A turkey feather from my backyard, from my back garden. We have lots of turkeys that wander through the back garden. And one of them lost a feather. I think that's, it could be an eagle feather, a hawk feather, or the
Let's go with that. Yeah, a golden eagle feather. Let's
golden eagle feather. But you could use any feather, but just it's quite good because you can get any, bits of any bits of eraser, you know, crumb or anything off your page. So I'm just now, this area here, I've already gone into second time. You can see it's getting a little bit darker. So I'm going to go back in and just work on that a bit more, because I doubt I'll be able to get all the way around. But the trick is, when you're doing these first layers, don't just focus on one little petal. Work around all the layers so that everything has got the same color underneath. I think the biggest problem in botanical painting is that you get completely hung up on one petal or one leaf and keep on painting it, and then suddenly think, oh blimey, how did I get that color? And you just can't get it again. So every petal ends up being a different color. Whereas if you work around all the petals with just a very simple color straight from the tube to start with, they've got that uniformity underneath. So they're all going to be influenced by that color. Because most of the colors that I use are transparent pigment, which means that the pigment particles are very, very small. And rather than sitting on top of the paper, they soak in and stain the fibers of the paper. So so that then when you put another color on top, that underneath color can shine through. So I'm just going into this little bit here again now, and I'm noticing now that I have like a little fold there, so I'll start putting that in now. And then there's another one here. So I'm just basically working around and darkening down my color. So go all the way around. It's very tempting to go straight for the difficult bit in the middle, but don't. I say to my students quite often, or usually, well, for me, definitely, probably not for all of you because you're so very experienced, but for me, I find that I never do my important bit first, even though it's so tempting, because I always mess it up. So it's probably better to mess up on a bit that doesn't show so much. And then when you're feeling confident, then go to the bits that show. So I'm going to go into the center now, and you can see from my tonal study that this one here is actually quite dark. It's got this one in front of it. I'm going to leave any kind of the bellies of the rose, leave those white, even though they have a color, because usually they're paler. So do all the insides of the petals to start with. So I'm working down. I've got my photo that I'm looking at too. But you really have to enlarge it. If I had the actual thing here, it'd be easy to see. So I'm just going inside here with my paintbrush and then pulling it out with my water brush. And I don't mind if the top of each petal is just paper at the moment. It won't be by the end, but it.
I've got a question, Lydia. Yeah. Hold on one second.
Yeah.
Hi, Lydia. You'll just need to unmute.
Yeah, it's just the actual painting seems to be moving in and out of focus, and I can't really see clearly what's happening.
Yes, I think the reason for that is I think it's when she's putting her art, when she's drawing and painting, that the camera's trying to focus on her hand, and then it so it's, yeah, when we did our test run, I think it is going to be quite difficult to redo that. So yeah, sorry, unfortunately.
I'll keep my hands, well, I'll move my hand out of time and give you time to see it. Is that better now?
Yes,
okay, so each time I'll paint and then I'll move my hand away.
Unfortunately, it's just what we've got to work with technology.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lydia. Thanks.
All the way from America to you.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, it's probably focusing on my brush. I'll go back into that center and then I'll leave it for a second so you can see.
We've tried. Do you have any more lights that you can turn on, or have you got?
Oh yeah, no, let me just turn that. That one keeps going off. Is that better?
That might be a bit better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it on a timer, that light?
No, it's just, you know, I bought them when I first started doing Zoom teaching on good old Amazon, and it just stopped working. So I've had two of them blow out, these round ones, you know, the kind of circle ones. Okay, so I'm going in there. Now I've got to do this one, which is in behind, so I'll get that one in. Okay, so I'm almost to the center now. So I'm going to start putting my next layer in. So I'm just going to go in a little bit drier this time, still just permanent rose. So now my mixture is a little bit more concentrated, which is a little bit more scary, but we'll be fine. I still wipe my brush out just the same way on my paper towel. So I've got a nice point on my brush, and I'm using Raphael 8404s, and they are number 4. And I have 2 of them, exactly the same. And they're the ones with the red, the orangey end. There are 2 that look very similar, 8408, which is much more pointy. And a lot of my friends use that, but I just can't. There's too much paint on there. I just can't.
When you said you were painting at the same time with 2 brushes, I thought you were going to be like ambidextrous.
Oh, no, no. No, it's just that
ninja style.
you can see it's happening more now, getting in darker. So I go in darker over the top, and I can use my water brush just to pull out the edge.
Yeah, that's clever. Yeah.
So it means that I don't have to keep mixing the same color up again. And to start with, it does it's a bit muddly if you kind of forget which is your water brush, but really the worst that can happen is that you paint a bit twice. Whoops. Now, if you do make a mistake and you go over the edge and you think, oh my God, I've lost that whole petal. I use a brush, I think in the UK, Billy Scholl sells brush like this. She calls it the Eradicator. I call it my scrubby brush. So it's a little square brush, can you see it? And if I turn it sideways, it's often called, this one's called a chisel blender, or it's sometimes called a shader. And so basically, if you go over a line and you want to sort it out, you go in with this, and I can just scribble along that line and push the paint out so that I get a nice clean edge again. And then I'll just take a little tiny bit of paper towel.
Now, someone's just asked, are you building up the dark areas first?
Yes, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. So you can see from my tonal study, I've marked in all the dark areas, and I'm building those up first. So in this area here, I've actually gone out a little bit further, but you can see here I can get much, much darker in there. And each time it's surprising. The first time it looks like nothing. And the more times you go in, it really goes pretty fast. So suddenly you've got a bright pink rose when it was a really very, so you can see that's getting a lot darker. So go back to where I was. So there's a lot of talk when you're talking about botanical art technique. People always get very worried when you talk about a technique called dry brush, which basically means that you start off with quite a wettish brush. And I'm just looking to see where I am there. Oh, I've missed a little bit. It goes like as you get more detailed, of course, you can't keep putting in these big swooshy wet washes. You've got to get drier and more detailed. So you do that by using your brush dryer, and also by just drawing with your paintbrush. So people get very worried about dry brush technique, but it just basically means you're almost drawing with your paintbrush and putting in those details. And hopefully in a minute, I'll be able to do that in one of these areas. The rose that actually was on the website isn't painted on paper. It's actually painted on vellum, which is calf skin. So you really can't do a lot of these washes. You really have to be dry pretty quickly. And you use a very different brush too, which doesn't hold as much water. So going in darker. So you can see down here, I'm really getting quite daring.
Is that your preferred material to paint on? So
I like painting on both, actually. That's so different though, because on vellum, you really have to work dry. It's a completely different brush technique. If you did a big wet wash like this on top of paint you've put down already, the whole lot would just lift right off. So you have to work really quite dry. Whereas here you can cheat for longer. So here I got a hard edge where I really need a soft edge. So I need to go back. I'm just going to jiggle the edge of that. No, can't move it. I'll have to leave that and go back in a minute. So really you have to do each petal at a time. So you paint your paint and then pull it out with your water brush. Now that bit really is quite dark in there. And I can soften it out. So in this area here, I don't know how we're doing for time, I've got a bit longer. I'll keep on going. And how's everyone doing? Is everyone managing to get that washed down? Everyone okay? Are people painting?
If you've got any questions, by all means, raise your hand if you want to ask Sarah directly, or type on Q&A.
I'm feeling very lonely here.
Ethel, hello Ethel. You might need to just unmute.
Just unmute.
Hello.
Hello. I'm in Britain, in the south of England. Just to say that another botanical artist said to me, for your scrubber brush, if you buy a Winsor & Newton flat bright,
yes,
it gives you chiseled. It's a very hard. It's an acrylic brush, and it's a treat. It's a lovely brush. So in Britain, you can buy a Winsor & Newton flat bright.
Oh, right. I think this is also a flat bright. I think the thing you have to be careful of is you don't want a bristle brush. It needs to be a nylon brush. And actually, you're quite lucky, because I think Billy Scholl, who's a great painter, she sells this brush she calls the Eradicator.
Yes, it is. Yes.
And that works the same way. I ordered one, but of course, because of all the problems, it hasn't arrived yet. But I just go to my local art supermarket and I just look for the cheapest brush, which is like little and square. And I've tried lots of different ones, but this one is literally it's like, well, in American, it's $2.99.
Yeah, it would be in Britain too.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ethel.
You're welcome.
So you really get into a bit of a rhythm, and usually I'm playing, when I'm doing this on my own, I'm playing Gregorian chant music, because it kind of, you get into kind of meditation-y sort of mood, just working around, building up. So I'm going to work on this little area here, because I think that's the most built up area.
Well, before we do that, should we stop for a little break and we can...
Yeah, good idea.
Okay, perfect. So last week, we, in our Arty class, this time last week, we featured an artist, Helga Picknell, who ran through colour mixing and also pointillism, gave us an introduction to pointillism, which was fascinating, from her art school that she runs for adults with special needs. And they did some amazing work as well. She panned the camera around and showed them all. It was fantastic. So we had some great pictures posted on our Facebook page, and we'll be speaking to Helga towards the end of this class to review the art sent or posted onto that post. But for now, I'd like Sarah to say a few words about her masterclass, which is happening on the 15th of October. It'll also be 3:30 in the afternoon UK time, so it'll be a little bit better if you happen to be in the US. It'll be an hour and a half later than the start of this one. So, so Sarah, can you explain a little bit more about what you intend to do?
Yeah, so a lot of botanical artists get very worried about painting leaves. So my light's going out. So I thought it'd be quite good to do a class on 2-hour masterclass on painting leaves. So there are various different sorts of leaves. There's something like this one, a basil leaf, which is very bumpy, but doesn't really show the veins. There's this, which is I shouldn't be telling you what it is, but it's a Swiss chard leaf. And there are lots of techniques for doing these leaves. So I'm going to break down the techniques so that we can actually work on techniques. So whether you paint between the vein or you leave the bump, we are going to, I'm just trying to find the rest of my papers here in the wrong order now. And we're going to talk about how you build up using the different layers, going from very light to darker. We're going to actually talk about the technique of making bumps and also leaving veins, as in this part of this ivy leaf. And I'm just trying to think, I have one other, I think. And we do that, you can see if we go back to that original one, to the basil leaf, which I think might be one of the ones that we paint, where I always start with my tonal study, because that basil leaf has long gone. And I always say to my students, well, it's really important it looks like a basil leaf. And there are many, or in America they say basil leaves, or there's this one, which is just different salad leaves. which is also just building up, and there are different sorts of bumpy, leaving the actual white vein. How do you put in coloured veins and show a bit of a bump? So I keep going.
They look amazing. They look so realistic. It's
Dark,
incredible. I mean,
dark
your basil leaf. I mean, it looks like it
basil
actually
leaf.
does have bumps on it. But
Yeah, well, that's just through doing what we're doing now. It's just building up, and then so I built up in that dark area, in this dark area, and then use my water brush to pull it out.
yeah,
Time. And there's always an overall kind of basic shape that you need to show. When you look at a leaf and the light's coming from the left, the light's going to catch this part here. There's going to be dark along the central vein, then a little bit more light, and then dark on this side. So once you've sort of worked out that technique, and you can see all my mixtures here, I'm really into the mixtures, then you can start working out how to draw leaves. People get very scared of leaves. And also with all the wonderful color mixing classes they're going to, you should be able to create incredible leaves by the end of these classes. So thank you to
well,
John.
that'd be fantastic. And what I'll do is, Sarah's got a shop where you can book that masterclass and secure your place. And when you book it, I know sometimes you can't get onto these Arty classes because they get fully booked, but you definitely, you're guaranteed of a place on a masterclass. And it's also 2 to 3 hours in length as well. So, and it's a lot more, as I said at the beginning, a lot more sort of relaxed, and you can, there's more time.
And John, can I give them handouts and things beforehand or afterwards?
Yes, you can.
So then you'll get a lot of, because I know these classes, they go so quickly, and it's really, my students love having things they can print off or watch. I know that you can watch the videos of this afterwards, but it's great to have things you could print off or keep on your iPad or something, so you can refer back to different techniques, because watercolor, my kind of watercolor, is all about techniques and going slowly. If you go, there are many different kinds of watercolor, but I think this is very good at the moment, in this time when we're all having to be so, we're all a little bit isolated, we've got lots of time, and we need to just slow down. This is a perfect way of doing it, I think. Because I find that painting this way, it slows my breathing down. You can't breathe too fast. I think even in people who have might have slightly wobbly, find that brush stroke quite difficult to do. I even find breathing exercises really help. So if you breathe in and then you paint on your downstroke or your out breath, you'll find that you get a nice even brush stroke. So anyway, let's go back into this.
So what I'll do is I'm actually going to just paste a link to Sarah's shop in the chat feature, and I'll do that right now, so you can see that appear in the chat, and you can visit Sarah's shop and secure your place if you did want to take part in that. But it's quite a few weeks on, so it's October the 15th, I think, isn't it, Sarah?
So, yes, it's in a little while.
Now we've also had a question from Liz. Can we have a photocopy of your tonal sketch for today? So that's,
oh yes, of course.
So yeah. What I'll do is I'll paste that on the, I'll put that on the, you know, I showed you at the beginning, you could press the previous Arty classes button, and you'll be able to find this class on there, and I'll put that as an image in there that you can then print off. So hopefully that.
Good idea, great. So I'll send that to you afterwards.
Yes, that'd be brilliant. Thanks.
Okay, so let's pretend that I have gone all the way around with 2 or 3 layers, and now I'm going to start working a little bit more detail. So I still use my 2 brushes. So I can see on the top petal to the far left, just in front of that leaf, it's really quite dark. So you can see I've gone in scarily darker. And I'm going to now use my paintbrush to pull out the little tiny brush strokes from that central area. It's really a lot darker. And now I'm going to use my water brush, which is always, it has to be much drier, and you need to be careful not to go right into the bottom of your paint stroke, but just to the edge, and you can soften that out. And when I look at that, it's got a tiny little darker area on the edge, so I'll put that in afterwards. So now I'm going down to the next one below it. So I want to leave this edge dry, because if it's dry, then the paint won't run. So I'm going to go down the edge of the petal in front, down right round that edge. But now I don't want my water brush to go right into there. So I need to fill in those gaps there. So I've now got a darker area. And I'm going to leave most of that dark area. So my water brush, I'll wipe it out again because it might have a bit of pink on it. really get it quite dry. I always say wipe its nose, and then go into that edge and just tickle the edge with your water brush so you're pulling it out, and you start getting that dirt. Now you can see that I've got a little bit of a back run, which means that the water is pushing back into the paint. That's because my water brush is a little bit wet. So it doesn't matter, because you can always go back and sort that out. So now I'm going to go to the one in front, go into this area here.
Diane's just asked, is the dark still permanent rose?
The dark is still just permanent rose, yes. Because this rose was really, you know, permanent rose is sort of like, it's a violet-based red, but there are more violet-based reds. But in my basic palette that I use, which is the one that you've all got, those are the basic colors I always use. So this is my palette. I use I go to the Chinese supermarket here. They have these amazing dishes. I think they use them for like sushi and stuff, but they're absolutely amazing for mixing watercolors. I like mixing on china rather than on plastic. And I just have a blob of each color of the colors that I use. So here, look, alizarin crimson, permanent rose, quinacridone magenta, scarlet lake, and these are my 2 siennas. And then I have a few extra blues in here, but basically I have my 2 blues, Windsor blue green shade, an ultramarine, and 2 yellows, New Gamboge and Windsor lemon. And then I have also, I always have lemon yellow nickel titanate, but if you take the leaf class, I'll explain why I have that, because in my palette, that's the only color that I have in my palette that's really opaque, and there is a reason for that, and it's especially good reason when you're painting leaves. But I don't use it. I would never use that in painting a pink flower, because you did with transparent pigment, your flower with lemon yellow nickel titanate underneath is going to come out orange, isn't it? Which we don't really want. Okay, so going back into this one, really getting very, very dark in here, and I'm just going to soften that edge because there's quite a big jump in that one between the dark and the light. And I am going to have to use another color to actually really get that. Oops, I lost my photograph. Hang on a sec. There it is. Let's go into this one again, which is very dark. You pull out each time. I think I'll go into this one here because that's also quite dark. And then we'll pretend we've done all the others and we'll just work on these a bit. How are we doing? Oh, we've got a little bit of time left. Might just do that one, otherwise it looks a bit funny. So I'm just using the tip of my brush, even though there's paint right in the belly of the brush. And I can really keep on painting for quite a while because I don't have to wash it out. So I can just keep on painting using my water brush each time. And you can see now that's getting, you can really see the difference between that petal in front and the petal behind. When I go back in, I'm just touching the edge of that paint stroke. So it looks scary when you put the dark color down, you know, your stronger value down, but then I'm just touching the outside edge to get it to blend a little bit. So I'm going to go back down into this one here.
Sue's asked, would you mind repeating the name and make of the fine pencil style eraser that you use?
Oh yes, of course. It's called the make is Tombow. It's Japanese, and it's actually called a Mono Zero. And that little tiny bit at the end, that is the eraser. And it's a bit like a mechanical pencil, propelling pencil, in that you get when you buy it, buy a couple of buy the refills, and you just feed them in exactly the same way as you would a lead for your pencil, but it's actually an eraser, and they're amazing. This one's actually got a bit broken, but
oh, that's great.
you can get into little tiny edges with it, which you really can't. I used to, in the olden days, get my eraser and sort of chop it up to make these little angles, but now I don't have to. It's all done for me, which is absolutely wonderful. Yeah. So I'm going in here, going in here, and you can see you're just working around, building up. And if you are drinking tea at the same time, just be really careful, because I have an awful tendency, I don't know what it is, and I don't know if other people have the same thing, but if you have other things on your desk which look like a kind of mug type thing, I always find that I end up dipping my paintbrush in it. And one time I was doing a commission really quite late at night. So my daughters were really quite small. And I was just, had been with them all day and then painting in the evening. My husband bought me up a gin and tonic, which was divine. But about 10 o'clock when I decided I'd had enough and I go down, I realized that my gin and tonic was green because I'd been mixing all my paint.
Oh.
So be very careful. It's a very weird thing how your brush is kind of drawn to whatever you have on your page. So you see here, there's a little fold in that one, and I just went in now and put that in. And then that little one at the bottom looks like a little molar, this one. So I'm just going to put a little bit of dark just there. Just with the tip of my brush. And now with the other tip, I'm just touching the far side just to smooth that out. So it's dark in here. And I've left that little light, but it's not really light, it's just a paler pink. I'm beginning to get the form on that. Build up, build up, build up. So I never go right down to that edge because I want to leave that quite light so that it sits on top of the petal that's underneath. But each time I'm deepening down my value. I'm using exactly the same paint, but it's just I'm building it up in layers. So here, it's got like a dark layer on the edge. So I'm pulling in from that dark layer. And here I'm just going to come in a little bit further. All right, so in this little area here, in the very dark bits, I'll show you what happens if I add a tiny bit of quinacridone magenta to my permanent rose. So you're not using this straight. Here's my quinacridone magenta, and you can see it looks much more violet-y. So I'm just going to add a little bit of it to my permanent rose. I'm still quite watery. When I get on in the painting towards the end, you can see in this other part of my palette where I was painting those leaves, that's all really quite dry. And I call these dry areas my skins of paint. And once I really got into a painting, I can go back in and just lift a little bit that's dried from the last wash, my last time of painting. And I know that it's the colors I was using, ready mixed, nice and dry, so I can get in dry, really, really dry. So I'm going to that outside petal again. And now I've got a little bit of quin magenta on my brush. So I go do the same thing, go into that edge and get a bit more in it. Talk among yourselves. Okay. And then I'm now going to go up. And you see the difference when you just put that little bit of extra color in. I'm still going to do the same thing. This technique of just softening out the edge is useful even when you're working very, very, very dry. And what I find is, these brushes are quite expensive. So I have my number one, my perfect brush, my new beautiful brush. And what happens is that they wear out. So when they start wearing out and the tip isn't quite as good, then they're demoted to be the water brush. And then I only have to buy one brush each time once I get going. And these Raphael brushes are, you can usually get them on, don't have to pay full price for them, but they are expensive. But Rosemary, I discovered Rosemary's brushes, and she makes brushes for our program here. And her brushes are very reasonable and they're just as good. I think I mentioned those on my equipment list. But if you're just starting off and you're thinking it makes such a difference to have a sable brush, treat yourself to a brush from Rosemary because her brushes are excellent. And you'll really find the difference because on the sable brush, the water molecules really hang on to the sable, so it doesn't all just kind of drop out in one go, which can happen a little bit with a nylon brush. The colloidal kind of properties of the sable brush hair actually helps the paint hang on. So it'll only come out if you really put a bit of force, press a little bit on the edge of your brush. So I'm going back in now into my more purpley mix and just working around. And each time I'm just using the tip of my brush. I'm not going using the whole of, I'm not pressing the whole of my brush, I'm just using the tip. And the paint is running down the brush. It's a bit like having a dip pen. And each time I'm really, really wringing out my water brush because I don't want that to be too wet now. I'm just literally smoothing the edges. This is really dark. But I don't want to add any other colors. I know people saying, why haven't you started adding blues and stuff? Once you do that, you lose the beautiful luminous quality of these roses. They're so vibrant. So I start adding other colors to it, anything with a lot of blue, I'm going to lose that and you can't get it back. So I'd rather go as far as I can with just my basic colors that I can control. I know exactly how I made this mixture. I can keep the same, have the continuity of color right around the whole thing.
There's a question here. Was the original rose drawing traced onto paper or hand drawn?
I originally hand drew it. Well, I drew it, yeah, and then, yeah, no, I hand drew it. What I do is I draw onto tracing paper. Look, here's my drawing. I draw onto my tracing paper rather than drawing onto paper. When I know I'm putting it on a piece of what I call posh paper, which is my good hot press paper, I'll draw onto my watercolor paper. And then I always used to make my own transfer paper, or just turn, so I'd write front on the front, turn it over, draw over the back. I'm sure anyone who's done any kind of transferring remembers that, even from like doing geography maps. You draw over the back, then you place it, you have to draw right over the lines. But recently, and I don't know if you can get this in the UK, but it's the most amazing thing, I never used to use graphite transfer paper because the way they used to get the graphite to stick to the actual transfer paper was with wax. And wax is or anything waxy, oily is the enemy of watercolor. But then recently, one of my students found this, which is graphite transfer paper, but it's wax free. And it's absolutely brilliant. So now I use that. Oh my God, please. And I just put that down. Can't find, oh, I'll take a bit out of here. I put that down. Is it gone? Oh, there it is. So I've got a half piece here. So it's got like a dark side and a light side. So I place my drawing, which I've done on my tracing paper, wherever I want it, and just draw over it. You don't press too hard, and you want a really nice sharp pencil. The thing about the whole thing is that your first drawing and all your transfers need to be really accurate. So you can't just, in England, there's a party game, and I can't tell you the name of it because it's not very politically correct now, but it's also called telephone. When you start a message, you whisper it all the way around the circle.
Oh, yes, yes.
And you get to the end and it's a completely different message.
Yeah.
That can happen with tracings because you do your drawing, you draw over the back, you put it down, you draw over the front, and it ends up, a lot of spaces become lines, shapes, and so this cuts out that whole thing. The other thing you can do if you can't get that, which is a good thing to do when you're watching telly at night and you're just a bit bored, you get a piece of I don't know if I've got one here. You get a piece of just copy paper and you get an HB pencil and you scribble, keep scribbling in all different directions. So you've built up a really, really thick layer of graphite. And then with a piece of kitchen roll, English, paper towel, American, rub it until you get off any excess. You can use that in exactly the same way as my posh graphite transfer paper. It works the same way. And the longer you use it and the softer it gets, you just keep reloading it until it almost just wears through. So that's what I've done in the past. So
Brilliant.
to go back,
all these tips, see, all these tips you're getting.
Yeah, I know. That's a very long, convoluted answer to say, yes, originally I drew it and then I transferred it. Okay.
Now,
so
I don't want to rush you, Sarah, but we are
Yeah.
kind of coming up to time now. So
Okay. Well, I'll just keep going because this will probably take me. The thing about botanical illustration and botanical art, it does take a while.
Well, I'll tell you what. While you still do a little bit more on that, what I'll do is well, first of all, are there any more questions from anyone?
Yes. Any questions? Well, people can always email me. I'm very happy to answer anything.
Yeah.
If you...
Karen has said we can get it in the UK.
Okay.
It's called Trace Down Wax-Free Tracing Down Paper. There
Oh,
you go.
thank you. Perfect.
So it is available. We can get things in the UK that you can get in the US.
I know. Well, they have different names. It's like
I
two names
know. I know.
divided by a common language.
Brilliant. Well, I think it's been a really great session. It's been given us a really good insight into botanical art as well, and the things that you think about. And I think the masterclass can be fascinating. Actually, it's going to be a really interesting one, especially with leaves. It's not one of the traditional things. You kind of imagine floral things, but
Yeah,
leaves.
leaves. I mean, everything has leaves, and people are so terrified of painting them.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, it's amazing
exactly.
how people will avoid putting a leaf in, but actually they're really fun to paint, because once it's like this, once you get going, you know your color, you've got your tonal study, so you know where the light and dark is. It's very easy just to kind of, you know, put the color in, and if you're not quite sure if it's right, just go back to your tonal study.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So can't wait to see your versions of the flowers
Oh
and
yes,
the
I can't
rose. It'll be
wait to see.
fantastic to see them. And we've got a Facebook post already created, so you can go to the previous Arty classes on our website, and it has the link there to the Facebook post, so that you can then post it. Alternatively, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's in the description. So if you look at the description, we've got everything there. We've got Sarah's shop link, the link to the Facebook post, and various other bits of information. So just click the drop down to have a look at the description.
And yeah, and we could probably link. I have an Instagram page, and I have a website too, if people are interested in seeing that, to see some
Exactly. Perfect.
more.
So by all means, post your on. So that has a link through to the Facebook post. Post your pictures there, and hopefully we'll get Sarah back at this time next week to comment on your pictures. But she's very busy, so I don't know. But we will definitely get her comments on those.
I'd love to do that.
And I'm sure Sarah will make some comments on the art as well. Vivian's asked, how many layers do you use? And does it not get so you have too many layers?
No,
That the transparency suffers.
no. So the transparency doesn't suffer because you're only using transparent pigment. And every layer you put down, you can't keep putting down really wet layers. Each time you go in, you need to make sure you wipe your brush and get drier each time. So I can show you. So this piece, the one that you can see on the actual, the one that's on the website, this piece, this is on vellum, so it's slightly different texture, and you can see it's a little bit frilly because it's so humid here today. But this piece, this down here, probably has about, my paintings probably have 25 or 30 layers of watercolor, but really, really, some of them are just so tiny that you wouldn't even notice. I can show you another one I'm working on now very quickly. Can I do this, John? Do you mind?
Yep, go on.
So here's another rose. This is a commission I'm working on at the moment. And if I can get it underneath my... So this has probably taken me, you can see in this part here, you see that kind of glow.
That's amazing, yeah.
So this is actually painted originally. I don't know what my sketchbook page is. Oh, wait a minute. So this is my sketchbook. When I first started, I do some studies where I actually work out my colors. And you can see here, there's a lot of different colors in here that I build up one on top of the other. It's more, I'm using more colors than my actual palette. But because this rose, which is a commission, she wanted like a corally rose, but of course the one I picked, which is called, I don't know if you have it in the UK, called Easy Does It. It looked lovely and kind of corally orange. She likes orange, but when it gets older, all these go really pink. I don't think, no, looking at it, I don't think it's pink enough. But this is bright, bright, bright orange I'm just putting in now. This I need to make pinker. So I'm going to use, and I've got my palette here. So I'm using very all transparent pigment. Can you see that? Right. So you can really see, and you can see all my skins of color that I'm going to go back to. So they're ready mixed and I can use them all around the place. But they're very, very thin, but I'm using them very, very, very dry.
Yeah, yeah.
Just
No,
you just literally lift and moisten. If I just moisten my brush, I can lift off as much. And when you get to this amount of color, it really is incredible how it can totally change it by just a very, very little bit. Anyway, so
that's amazing. I mean, we could go on forever.
I know, wouldn't it be fun?
And that's the point of the masterclass.
Yeah, that's right. So the masterclass we won't be talking about, but with leaves, we can talk about leaves and really talk about limited palettes and mixing leaves and how to influence colors and all those things that are so important when you're, you know, and how to choose what your green is going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all very
I
important.
don't want to, because we've got a masterclass starting in about half an
Yeah,
hour.
you need to go. You
Which
need
I'm
to
hosting.
go.
But before we do that, I wanted to bring in Helga, because Helga was here last week, and she's ready and waiting in her school. She's got an art school for special needs adults,
And
which
where
is
is Helga based?
I don't know. Let's ask her. Hello, Helga.
Hello, hiya.
Hello.
Yes, I'm based in south of England, in Kent. We're in Ashford.
Oh, right.
There we go. Brilliant. So hello, Helga, again. And last week we did pointillism and color mixing and everything. And let me just share with everybody the Facebook post. And so we had quite a few different attempts
Oh,
from different
lovely.
people on the Facebook post. Do you want to say a bit about this, Helga?
Yes, they were absolutely great. Some very good entries. Sort of people try to, for example, just work with primaries only. Yeah, it was just some very good comments on color mixing and the technique itself as well. So everyone, it was so hard yet again to pick one out.
To pick a winner. Pick a winner.
But there was one person that sort of stood out. Because she'd chosen a completely different subject.
Yes.
And she did try and work with just the primaries only. So she didn't go to her palette and took extra colors that perhaps given. So her name is Sue Peters.
Ta-da!
So yeah, well done. I just like the whole, the idea of choosing a different subject. What was brilliant, and all the colors she has created by just using the 3 primaries was well, brilliant.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you very much. And how's your day going? Are you creating lots of amazing things in your school today?
Fine. Do you want to show your work, Stuart? There we are. Stuart says painting. I don't know if we can see it.
You might need to hold it a bit closer because it's quite dark because of the light behind. Oh yeah, lovely. Look at that.
Today, very clever. We've got Andrew holding up his work in the background.
Well done, Andrew. That's perfect.
Martin, do you want to hold up your color ones there that you've got, the ones that are dry? And Martin likes Star Wars, so.
Oh, there we go.
A Star Wars fan.
Well done, Martin. Brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant.
Well done.
I'll show you more, but we'll be here forever. There are a few.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you very much, Helga. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for making those comments. That's great. Thank you. Brilliant. Well, what a great time that was last week, and today it's been really fantastic and really eye-opening. It's been really fascinating, Sarah, your things. I'm really looking forward to everybody's art. So please do post it up on that Facebook
yes, and if
post.
anyone has more questions, I'm really happy to answer them if you forward them to me. I'm very happy to answer any questions, because I just think I might have forgotten something, or, so yeah, just keep painting. I can't wait to see what everybody does.
Exactly. Well, that's brilliant. So thank you again. Thank you again for such a great class. I'm off to host the masterclass with Liz Chatterton now. We're doing a curious cow in watercolor, so that should be fantastic. It's
I've met a few of those.
yes, exactly. So it's bye-bye from me. Thanks for joining us on our first international Arty class, and it's bye-bye from Sarah.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.